Welcome everyone. Welcome to how to do a real discovery and why it even matters. So that's what we're going to be reviewing here today. Welcome everybody to this discussion. And while we're waiting, we're going to get started here in just a few minutes. I love this question that we put into, I'd like to put this in the chat here, is tell us a little bit about what did you want to be when you grow up? Think back in the day, and what did you want to be? What was the profession you want? Maybe it was pre-sales, that could be possible. But go ahead and put that in the chat whenever you get a moment. Let's see. What about our panelists today? What did you want to be? Forensic accountant with the FBI. That's pretty cool, Bonnie. What about our panelists? What did you guys want to be when you grew up?
Mine always changed depending on what movie I'd recently watched. So Twister, Storm Chaser.
Storm Chaser, nice.
Apollo 13, wanted to be an astronaut.
Awesome. Excellent. We got an actor, international tour guide, filmmaker from Travis. Andrea, professional dancer. No pre-sales folks, you know, sometimes you just fall into it. Yeah. I wanted to be a doctor. That's what I wanted to do, I guess. So, but not doing that. Midwife.
I agree with Mark's statement that the performing arts and SE work actually share a lot of time.
Overlap.
Very much so. Very much so. Stephanie, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay, so I wanted to write and illustrate my own children's books. Don't know why.
Nice.
But my mother, to her credit, actually helped me publish a book, and it sold one copy. I believe she has it still.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Excellent. Excellent. Well, cool. Well, we are a few minutes in. I guess, what do y'all think? Should we go ahead and kick this thing off here?
Let's do it.
Cool. All right, let's get started. Cool. Well, thank you all for joining here today. My name is Larson Stair. I'll be your host. I am the CEO and co-founder of DemoFlow. Just to get started, a couple housekeeping items. Again, we're just going to keep this conversational here today. We're going to keep all of us an eye on the Q&A. We have Kevin kind of in the background helping us field some questions that happen. So if you have any questions, use the Q&A button at the bottom, populate some of those questions in, and we'll keep an eye on that to either try to field those either in the moment or at the end of our discussion here today. And then, of course, we like to use the chat as we're kind of moving throughout a discussion, just to have some kind of continual dialogue. We will be engaging all of you using a few different polls here today to kind of kick us off here. And again, we'll use that chat, keep it more conversational. But yeah, let's kind of kick things off here. So what we're going to be reviewing here today is how to do real discovery and why does it matter? And so this is a really kind of hot topic for everyone. I think it's a really key part. And we have a really great panelist here that we'll go ahead and introduce here in just a moment. But before we get started in any of this, I just want to thank you all for joining us here today and just kind of helping to make the PreSales Collective possible. This is just a really special community of people, and I'm really just very proud to be a part of it here. So first off, I want to give a shout out to our panelists. So Stephanie, Alex, Mark, and Courtney, thank you all for joining here today and taking some time out to share some of your wisdom about discovery call process and how we can make this really, really effective and spread some of that knowledge there. And then, of course, shout out to the PreSales Collective founders. We got James and Yuji, just couldn't be more honored, again, to be a part of this. Massive respect to what you all have created here. It's really amazing to watch this kind of build over time. And then, of course, Kevin has recently joined the team. I got to know Kevin a couple months back, and just a really great addition. So thank you all for having us here today. And a little small note is I met James almost a year and a half ago, right at the front half of the pandemic. We were one of the first sponsors of the PreSales Collective. We bought a Zoom license for him, a whopping like 20 bucks. So we were one of the first there to help sponsor there. But again, I'm just very proud to be a part of this community. It's very special to watch all of you and some of the great content that we're putting out here today. So that's kind of the purpose. And so what we want you to get out of this webinar here today. So again, we're going to use the Q&A for questions. So feel free to populate any questions you have in there. We'll keep a good eye on that. And then be active in the chat. We can keep a close eye on things that are going on there. But again, what the point of this discussion here today is how do we run great discovery call processes? And how do we make, this is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to selling. And if you can really perfect this skill here, you can really, really help to make a better connection with your audience, or have better presentations, just better professional connections there with your kind of customers. And so what we all really hope is that you kind of hear from these panelists here some best practices, and they can help to share some of their wisdom and a few key takeaways as we kind of go through this discussion here today. So without further ado, we will kind of move on to some polls here. So what we would like to do is pop open a quick poll. And so what option best describes you in terms of your roles and responsibilities? Curious to see what we have going on here. So quite a bit of kind of ICs and solution consulting. That makes sense. Got some managers. Excellent. All right. Excellent. For our panelists, did you all start off as direct individual contributors, or did you move right into management, or how did that all work for you all?
Yeah, I went. PreSales is my first job out of grad school, so I'm like one of those rare ones who just stumbled into it right away, and was an individual contributor in a wide variety of markets before getting the benefit of being a manager.
Awesome. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, for me, I kind of fell into it. I think it was a savvy recruiter who saw I was a little bit exhausted doing implementation, and he introduced me to the whole concept of sales engineering, helping people without delivering a production environment. And, it's been a great ride.
Excellent. And Alex, how about you? You jump right in?
Yeah, I actually started as an SDR and was doing the sales track, and I was curious about the technology, so I moved to an SC role. So yeah.
Excellent. Actually, Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, I started my career doing more client support work, answered a 1-800 number for about a year, which was a wild ride, used my voice a lot, and then found out about solutions engineering and have not looked back. I've had a few different roles in different markets with selling different types of products, and then had the opportunity to move into leadership about 4 years ago.
Awesome. That's great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share some results here. We have a pretty good blend. So mostly sales engineers, solution consultants, solutions architect. We've got some leadership in here, people that are just generally interested. So welcome. We're going to have some really great discussion here today. And then we have some folks on the sales side, account executives, sales reps, and sales leaders, so on and so forth. So cool. All righty. Well, what I would like to do next is we are going to move into just general introductions here. So we're going to kind of go around the horn, and I would love everyone to kind of introduce themselves, and maybe we can kind of go and start with Stephanie. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I am a manager of solutions engineering at DocuSign, based in the Seattle area. And right now I lead a team of solutions engineers in our EDU and not-for-profit space, one of probably the more fascinating, exciting spaces that I've worked in. And yeah, so I think I mentioned I came into pre-sales in a unique way, but I've been doing it for about the last 10 years or so. And I just like Courtney, I love it.
Excellent. Awesome. Alex, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Medrano. I am the sales engineer at Hasray, a small Salesforce native organization. I am based out of Denver, Colorado. So all my Denver people, hello. Yeah, and as I mentioned, I started as an SDR, got really interested in like the technology side of things. So I moved into an SE role and never looked back, and I'm very happy. I've been doing it now for 5 years. So
Excellent.
Happy to be here.
Excellent. All right, Mark, how about yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Warney. I'm a senior director with Reciprocity. My team is a pre-sales team. I'm in the New York metro area on the Jersey side. My role really, I help define the process, I help train, I help mentor my teammates, also partner with sales enablement to help the onboarding and training process as well. But I do have to roll up my sleeves. I still do a lot of direct account and direct demo support And I try to set an example where I can as to what good looks like, whether that's from initial discovery to the final handoff. I've been doing this, I'm embarrassed to say, since the .com boom, if you guys are old enough to remember what that was. So I've been doing it since late last century.
Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate that introduction. And Courtney, why don't you take us home here? Introductions.
Yeah, excited to be here. I'm Courtney. I'm one of the leaders on the SC team at Sprout Social. I've been with Sprout just about 4 years and have been doing solutions engineering for about 8. And today I support a team that actually handles a couple of different verticals within our business, our mid-market team, our small business team, our agency sales team, our Latin American sales team, and our growth sales team. So a lot of different types of customer interactions. We're wearing lots of different hats. And so I'm also based out of Newark, Connecticut.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you all. And thank you for the introductions there. Welcome again. My name is Larson Stair, CEO and co-founder of DemoFlow. Alex, just like yourself, I started as an SDR. And then I finally migrated my way into pre-sales, then migrated into full cycle AE, and somehow I wound up in this role right now. So it's a pleasure to meet all of you. And yeah, let's kind of go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so we can just kind of see everyone here. And so where I think we'd like to start our conversation here today, we have a few different kind of questions that we're going to be walking through. But I think the best place for us to start is, A, how do we define real discovery? And who I'd like to start with, Stephanie, why don't we kind of start with you? Why don't you tell me a little bit more about how do you define real discovery?
Sure, thanks. I think it helps to just kind of start with just defining discovery in of itself, because distinguishing between qualification, discovery, and scoping is really important. Those words get used interchangeably, and it creates confusion about what discovery actually is. So when I'm working with my teams, I really try to make a distinction where qualification is there a real opportunity to be won here? And discovery is defined as what is our pathway to winning this opportunity? And then scoping is what do we need to successfully deploy this customer? And when you distinguish it like that, it really starts to sort itself out in terms of what questions you ask at what stage of the sales cycle to what individuals, really starts to make a lot more sense. So those are the basic definitions that we use. And I found it helpful to sort out what is not discovery before we start looking at what is discovery. And then if I were to think about real discovery, distinguishing it from like fake discovery, then I think that real discovery can't just uncover information or uncover value. It also needs to add value to the sales process and also to your prospects, right? I think a prospect should come out of a discovery conversation feeling like they've already received value from you. They have a better understanding of their challenges. They have a better understanding of what impact they're actually trying to make in their organization. They feel confident and excited about the solution. So, I don't know if that's a super clear litmus test, but that's something I think is a differentiator between just discovery and real discovery.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I really like how you just qualify the qualification stage, discovery, and then scoping, and the different questions that could be kind of allotted within those. So I really, really appreciate that. And would you mind repeating that real quick? The definitions there. It seems like Chris maybe missed that part.
Yeah, qualification is there a real opportunity to be won? Discovery is what is our pathway for winning that opportunity? And scoping is what do we need to know in order to actually successfully deploy the customer?
Awesome. Thank you. Courtney, how about you? Tell me a little bit more about how you define real discovery.
Yeah, I love what Stephanie just said about sort of defining the pathway to getting the technical win. And, when we talk about discovery, there's a few different things that we could say. Discovery is certainly a skill to be learned and honed and practiced and mastered. It's also a point in time in the sales process, right? Learning about the customer, understanding the need. But I'd also like us all to think about discovery as a mindset. And if we think about discovery as a mindset, it reframes it from a point in time during the sales process to something that's actually ever present during the process. The saying disco never dies applies to both music and sales. every opportunity, every engagement, every question a customer asks, every moment with them, I think is an opportunity to do more discovery and to have those discovery conversations, to learn about them, understand their use cases, and ultimately what's going to drive a buying decision and help you secure that technical win. And what I think is a little bit different about SE discovery versus that AE discovery for those sales folks who are on the call, that SE disco is really driven by that curiosity to understand, what is your business trying to achieve? What challenges are you facing today? And what's the business value if we solve those challenges for you? And I think that's what helps drive that conversation to get to the technical win.
I really like that a lot, especially the part around, disco never dies, right? Like, I think that, extending that throughout the sales cycle is just like so critical and frequently missed, right? You have this one call, that's the discovery call, and it's like, I'm gonna get everything out there. And then extending that beyond can be one of the lost arts, maybe. And it can really differentiate you too, and make sure you really understand what's going on. Like that. Thank you. Cool. Well, I think the next question we want to move to next is, why do so many of us struggle with this real discovery process? And Alex, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on this. Is why are so many of us struggling with this?
Yeah, and I mean, I like to point out, like Stephanie mentioned, a lot of people don't actually even know what discovery actually means, right? So you first have to define it within the organization. And I also think a lot of people struggle because there's really a fine line between not doing enough discovery, so staying very high level, surface level conversation, and getting too into the weeds, right? And there's nothing really concrete, there's nothing enough information for us to go off. So it is very important to just define your goals, get those clear goals, like what are the critical requirements that we need to solution, right, to prove out and ensure that specific customer success, right? And every customer is different. So what do we need to figure out in solution in our tool to ensure their success at the end of the day?
Yeah, certainly. I love that. And, I think discovery call can be a struggle too, because can feel a little uncomfortable at times, right? If you don't do it correctly, it can feel a little interrogative. You're kind of digging too deep. Someone gets it's a little, cagey there a little bit. But, I think Courtney, to your point, is adding value into that discovery process and making sure they leave that call feeling like, wow, I really learned something, or they really know about my business. Like, that's how one way you can kind of avoid that. So Mark, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. So tell me a little bit more. Why do I so much struggle with the discovery process?
Sure, this is a great conversation, starting with the definitions. And as we go and look at it a little bit deeper, over the years, I've heard really every excuse for pushback. I've heard it from prospects and clients. I've heard it from AEs, of course. Things like, I don't have enough time. I know what I want, just let me look at it. I've done the research, just let me see it. The product sells itself. So I see heads nodding. We've all heard this. So I always use the analogy, and I'm dating myself, but you have that Jerry Maguire moment. Help me to help you, okay? We're on the same team. We want the technical win. We all want the same thing. And especially notice this recently, this last year or two since COVID, the acceleration, speeding everything up, meetings are compressed, time is compressed. We're all at home hopping from meeting to meeting. And there was actually a study by McKinsey that shows one of my favorite sayings, you can speed things up by slowing things down. So too fast, less quality, skipping steps, never a good model. The study actually shows that when you slow down a little bit, you can go deeper and faster to achieve your objectives as a team. And the last piece that's important, I believe, is we really need to understand the must-haves in discovery versus the nice-to-haves. When do we tap the brakes and say, I don't have enough to do a demo, or I don't have enough to do a scripted demo. I don't have enough to do a POC. What do those levels look like? Can you articulate them? And now this last part, you might struggle depending upon the organization you're in, but once you articulate those, know if you can pick your battles. So is there a pre-sales executive who is a peer to the sales organization leader? Or are you all under the sales organization? Depending upon the culture and organizational structure, that may dictate how much political power you may have to push back at times. So just know the environment in which you're operating. And last, do your best to sell it to the account executives. Put yourselves in their shoes. Nobody wants to fill out a lengthy form for you to bless it and agree to do a demo. So if you say, I need X, Y, and Z, it would be really helpful to pop it into a column and say, well, these fields are already in Salesforce. I'm not asking you to do more work. I'm asking you to leverage, some of the CRM information that we have and just send me the opportunity link, and I'm just directing you to the right place. So just be cognizant of your teammates, the culture, define everything properly, and hopefully you'll be very, very successful.
It's really great. I appreciate that, Mark. I really like some of the points, a lot of points that you said in there, but specifically around pushing back a little bit at times respectfully to your audience and being like, I don't have enough information to go on to this next phase. And like you mentioned, both the demo and then also the POC. So Courtney, relating back to one of the points is discos never die. I like that. I see we need a t-shirt. Someone's got to create a t-shirt for that. But like that's exactly that point, right? It continues, it keeps going. And, especially on the technical side, we want to make sure we have the right adequate information as we're moving throughout it. Cool. All right. So the next question that we have here is, how can people work on improving their discovery skills? So, okay, I'm an SC, I'm an AE, I'm bad at discovery. I may have accepted that. I'm not really good at it. I want to get better. And so, Alex, I'd love to hear from you. I was like, tell me more about how do we improve this discovery call skill set?
Yeah, so I think there's 3 different things. First, prepping, and making sure you are all caught up with the customer use case, what they're looking for, what their needs, and just get up to speed with the AE, right? Hey, what do you talk to with this customer? We also just don't want the customer to have to repeat themselves, right? When they go through discovery. So that's number 1. Number 2, practice. The more you do it, the more you know what to look for, the more you understand what a successful customer looks like, and you'll be able to craft better questions. And lastly, collaboration. Collaborate with your teammates, your team, your manager on what's working, what's not working, what questions have we been successful with, and just continuously improve your craft. Disco never dies.
Excellent. Well, I got one before I move on to the next panelist here. I have one question for you, Alex, or anyone else here on the panel that wants to ask us in the Q&A is there such thing as too much discovery, and kind of where and when do you draw the line on that? So Alex, I don't know if you have any thoughts there. Yeah,
there is a thing of too much discovery, and it does changes from one organization to another, right? But as I mentioned, what are the more critical things that we need to either prove out to make that specific customer successful, right? Mm-hmm. So once you define those critical requirements, that's when you know that's enough discovery, and then you can move into the demo.
Perfect. Excellent. Cool. Well, I'm going to move to Stephanie here next. So tell me a little bit more. How do we improve discovery skill sets? How do you work with your team? Tell me a little bit more about what you think there.
First of all, I completely agree with Alex. Just the cool thing about discovery is I don't care how bad or good you are, you can always get better, right? It's not one of those things where you check the box and say, I'm great now. I don't have to do it anymore. But I encourage people to practice discovery, yes, with their customers, but also in their everyday life, right? Just as Courtney mentioned, just having a curious state of mind. I think like when I'm trying to figure out what my 2-year-old did at daycare that day, I can't just outright ask her, right? I need to ask probing questions. I need to do things that are meaningful for her to get that information. I got to talk to her teachers. I check her backpack. I, listen to what songs she's singing on their way home. Like I'm getting that information from lots of different sources. Over Thanksgiving, talk with an older family member, see if you can get them to tell you any incriminating stories, right? There are ways to just practice discovery that don't require a really high risk opportunity on the line. That I actually think pays off quite a bit. But besides that, I guess my tips would be first, throw away your questions. I think it's probably unpopular. It's kind of the go-to for SCs to have their hit list of questions that they want to get through. But more often than not, with my teams at least, I find that becomes a crutch, right? You sound like a robot. It kind of gets into that interrogation space, and it prevents you from diving deeper into things that just warrant that extra level of curiosity or conversation. So instead of having a listing of questions, I would recommend starting with 3 to 5 broad topics that you know you want to cover, and then one really good question that you have written down to kick off the discovery, and then let the conversation flow from there. And I think especially as you're getting started, it can be that can be a really scary thing to do, but it is by far the fastest way to get good at discovery, in my opinion. And then the other thing I would say, I actually learned this from my husband, who is an investigator for public defense. And that is get good at silence. So when he's interviewing a witness or a defendant and trying to get like good evidence, and they stop talking, he doesn't just rush on to the next question, right? He purposely pauses. He might like organize his papers or, you know, finish up a note that he's writing, but he allows that silence to hang for about 5 or 10 seconds. And almost inevitably, the person that he's interviewing is going to start to fill the space. And that's when he gets the juicy details. So I've actually learned that in the past year just by listening to him work from home as I'm working from home too.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so great. And just that silence can, well, it can keep people going. They keep talking. They may keep going on that topic or dig a little bit deeper themselves just by kind of sitting in silence. I also really love, Stephanie, the comments you made around, you know, prescriptive questions versus topics that we want to be doing, because the whole point of discovery is conversation, right? You can't be curious if you're, okay, I got number 1 down, now I got to go to number 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're focused on the questions versus the conversation. I really like that.
These 35 questions, you know,
right?
you're going to race through it and not dig what you need to dig.
Yeah, when you have your questions too, that's where you hit the interrogation pieces, right? It's okay, thank you for your answer. Okay, next one. All right, here we go to the next thing, and I can just feel kind of throw it off a little bit, that conversation there. So appreciate that response. Cool. So it looks like Q&A, no questions right now. So I think we can kind of move on to our next question here. So Courtney, I'm going to ask you, so how do you balance the need for deep discovery with prospects' with their desire to see the actual product demo quickly and kind of going through that? So how do you kind of balance that kind of desire there versus the need to do discovery?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure, because as the SE, you want to, and you should know enough so that you're showing the right parts of the product or platform or software to solve for that pain or provide that business value, as well as just meeting the requirements of their evaluation, right? Like we need this sort of laundry list of things in the product. But you also want to balance that with a great customer experience that doesn't hide the product away for too long. Because at the end of the day, like if they're actively engaged with you, you do want to get to that product, but you don't want to erode trust with the customer by showing the wrong things. And so I think there's actually an argument to be made that discovery, if done right, should speed up your sales process rather than slowing it down, because you're not spending time sort of with the harbor cruise or the info dump on everything that your software can do. And you're instead focusing on exactly what's going to help them make an informed buying decision and secure that technical win. And if done right, there's actually a few ways that if you have the opportunity to show your software and also ask some discovery questions along the way, there's a way to sort of mask that discovery as a demo. So I call this approach the Big Mac in my organization. And you basically picture a Big Mac sandwich and the questions are the bread and the demo is sort of the toppings on the burger, right? And if you layer in those questions around, tell me how you're doing this today. Let me walk you through what that looks like here. Tell me if we, could solve that problem that you talked about. Would this save you some time? How much time would it save you? How much more efficient are you going to be now that you have access to this? And I think that when you layer that discovery in with the product, that leads to those wow moments. You can see the customer's mind being blown as you show them that new workflow that's going to save them 5 hours. And that's when I'm the most excited on a demonstration, is when you can see that light bulb moment. And I think the product really can facilitate that.
I like that a lot. I think that's very well said. And, discovery can extend into the demo, like sales cycle for sure, but into the actual product demonstration. And you got to remember to pepper in your questions throughout that time, really can help to direct you or change course of the demo potentially if you uncover new pieces of information there. So I certainly agree with you. I think that's really great. Mark, how about yourself? So how do you deal with this balance between need to do discovery and then going into that prospect's desire to do demos?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Larson. You know, after all these years, I'm still learning. I keep looking down. Courtney, some great points. I'm writing things down as each of you are speaking. This is great stuff. One of my favorite sayings is sometimes a conversation is better than a presentation. So, you know, to Courtney's point, we want to respect your time. We want to spend a little time now to save a lot of time later. And that's also going to respect your time by doing proper discovery. We're going to introduce only the relevant features, and we're going to introduce them at the right depth for the stakeholders that are on that call, which is also important. You don't want to be too much in the weeds or too high level. Could turn off either audience. Remember, balancing this need is also an account executive desire. They want to hit the gas. Everyone wants to hit the gas. We're always the one to gently pump the brakes in pre-sales. I like to say, as my reputation's on the line as a presenter of the solution, that in an ideal world, I believe discovery is done when I have no more follow-up questions. So that, you know, disco never dies and all of that. In the perfect world, that's my humble opinion. Do I always get what I want? No. So we've got to proceed at the right depth to get as much as I can in the time allowed. And I always emphasize to the prospect or the account executive that to respect your time, we want to be one and done. Spend a little time now. We'll have one meeting, cover all your questions. If we rush through it, what might happen? A follow-up demo, upload data, build a dashboard, do a detailed use case. You know, what's wrong with spending a few minutes now to potentially wrap this up in one call and then proceed to the valuable implementation discussion and the logistics and what that might look like? I do believe discovery can occur during a demo, just in my opinion, hopefully not initial discovery.
And I tell you, that was a really good, that was a great objection handling there, Mark. As you were saying, you get someone that pushes back and you say, just show me the product. Just say, hey, you know, and paint the picture of them of what life is going to look like if you don't spend this time with me right now. And if you do as well, it's like, hey, the reason why we need to do this, and people are usually reasonable and say, hey, this is why we need to do this. We're saving you time along haul. Trust me, I've done this a million times. Like, this is the right way to do things. So I really appreciate that response.
Polite assertiveness.
Yes, certainly. Excellent. Well, cool. Well, looks like we got, let's see, we got, a few open questions here. At what stage do you go back to a prospect if you need more information? I mean, I think we can probably all agree that it's kind of ongoing, right? I mean, it seems like that regardless of stage that you're in, you always consistently come back to that. I think that's been brought up a few times here. Anything else to add on that one in particular from anyone? Good.
I think sometimes you may uncover an opportunity to chat with perhaps a different team or a different stakeholder. And I think always asking for time with those folks is great, especially like if you're mid-evaluation. Let's say we hear, oh, actually, like this other team might actually have a use case for this, or I want to loop in X who will better help you understand how we're doing this today. And so I do think it's not like the process starts over, but you also have to put your disco hat back on when those situations arise and think of how you can uncover what you need for that particular individual, that stakeholder, or that team. And then also tie it back to those broader goals that you've uncovered throughout the process too. So you can paint a really big picture of like, look how much easier everyone's lives are going to be with this solution.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that a lot. Just pausing, see what else it could impact there, go broader in the deal so you can just see how you can secure more value across the entire organization that you might be working with there.
Love going wide.
Yeah, sure. Excellent. Well, cool. I'm gonna bring in Stephanie here next. So let's talk a little bit about what are some ways that you can make discovery feel a little bit less like Q&A with the prospects there. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is in making sure they understand your purpose there, right? Too often we make our prospects feel like, hey, the reason we're having this call is so that I can be prepared for the demo. It has nothing to do with our prospect, right? Bringing them into that purpose, saying, hey, it's important for me that we understand not just your process, but why you're doing things the way you're doing them, what impacts that's having, how you want things to work, so that I make sure that we show you the right thing, we sell you the right thing, and then also we get you on the right, so you have a smooth ride at the beginning of this partnership as possible. Just a simple statement like that is going to change the tone of your discovery. You've now brought them into your purpose. They are now equally invested in your purpose as you are, rather than just answering the questions that you throw at them. The other thing that I think is important is to come to the table with knowledge, right? Like I said, I think discovery is about adding value to your prospect. And I think that a big part of this is just spending 10 or 15 minutes prior to discovery, educating yourself. Some people call this e-discovery. I tend to just call it Google because that's what I do. But really, I'm spending a little bit of time trying to find something of note, either about my customer, their industry, even the individuals that I'm talking to. So I'm going to review the CRM. I'm going to check out their competitors' sites. I'm going to look at their industry news. One of my favorite places to check is actually Glassdoor and other kinds of review sites like that, because it actually gives you a glimpse of what it's like to work inside that organization. I've always worked with software that's aimed at improving a lot of internal processes. So it gives me a good sense of, is there a lot of turnover? Are decisions made from the top down? Are they made from the bottom up? What kinds of things are causing employee dissatisfaction? What kind of values do people expose in their reviews? So that information is not going to show up outright in my discovery or in my demo, but it certainly informs how I approach the conversation and where I dig more and how I understand the people on the other side of the phone call, which for me helps eliminate that horrible inquisition feeling.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a really good piece of advice there. That Glassdoor reviews, it's a whole new level of insight that you can really be pulling out of. And I think when you come with that extra piece of information, it almost automatically disarms that person, because you're like, I genuinely care about you. Like, I want about your organization. I'm really invested in this conversation. And so it can start you off on the right foot. And so it feels less like Q&A. Courtney, what do you think about kind of this topic here?
Yeah, Stephanie's point is right on in that if you reframe it as what's in it for the customer rather than what's in it for you, if they understand that why and that the why is about them, I think that opens the door. But I also think it's easy just to ask the customer for their buy-in. The reality is you're probably not the first person in the org that they've talked to. Depending on your sales cycle, it might have been something like BDR. Maybe they've had a chat with the AE before. So it's a second or third call, and you certainly don't want them to feel like they have to rehash everything. And so getting their approval before diving in, I think, makes a world of difference. Whether it's, before we get into the product, I've just got a couple of questions I'd love to ask you. Or is it okay if I ask you some questions throughout to make sure we're hitting home with the demo? I think just asking those questions opens the door and just makes them comfortable with, okay, I'm going to get some questions. I think really good SEs will usually say, my AEs filled me in on all of the conversations you've had. If you have a tool like Gong, that's great too, to listen to those calls previously to hear it from the customer end. And then I think in your approach, the words that you use can also help get the customer talking. Terms like, I'm curious, tell me more about, I'd love to dig a bit deeper. If you approach the conversation with curiosity and empathy, and if you ask open-ended questions that cannot be answered with yes or no, you're going to get the customer to open up. And I love the point earlier about basking in the silence and giving them that space to get the wheels turning before they answer. I think all of that's really going to help the customer to have a really open and empathetic discussion with you.
Excellent. That's really great advice. I really appreciate that.
Hey, Larson.
Cool. Yeah.
To Courtney's point, that was a great point about open-ended questions. I love finishing a conversation, not a demo, but a conversation with an open question. A lot of AEs jump in and say, did you like what you saw? Well, that's a yes or a no. I like to ask, tell me how you feel about what you've seen today. Tell me how you feel what you saw is going to make your life better. Then just let them talk.
Love that. I love that. Or one of my biggest pet peeves is, did that make sense? Oh my gosh. Oh, yes, everything makes sense. We get it. It's such a closed-ended question. There's really nothing. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Mark. Mark, I'm going to be coming right back to you. I have another question for you that I'd love to get your perspective on is, how do you encourage your prospects to introduce you to others in the organization if you need to do further discovery?
Yeah, and this is almost a using my quotey fingers, a salesy question. And I think it's very valuable for pre-sales to attend sales enablement and sales methodology training, as long as it doesn't involve forecasting. But, the art of sales, is certainly important in our profession. So these are kind of examples I would take out of SPI, Sales Performance International, for solution selling. So when I'm doing discovery, and I think we can go deeper, broaden the conversation, I'll ask my stakeholder, what does the success of this project mean to you? Does it mean you achieve your MBOs? Do you get recognition, a bonus of some sort? What does it mean to your boss? What does it mean to the board? You don't know what it means to the board? Would you like to find out? Would you like me to prepare an executive dashboard to show what executive real-time visibility looks like? Would an executive level demo help you get budget? Is there something else I can do to plan and help you sell internally? So these are all kind of solution selling questions that I think encourages them to go deeper, either in their department, cross departments, or hopefully up the chain of command.
I like that a lot. And especially because, it's just a way to uncover higher levels of chains of command, if you will, but ways that you can provide additional value as you move up the chain of command. It could unlock doors for you and it'd provide additional value kind of throughout that sales cycle. Excellent. Alex, how about yourself? What is your kind of perspective on this?
Yeah, and like Mark and Courtney alluded to, discovers what is in for the customer, right? So I think there's two main things, right? Like first, setting the right expectation, right? What are we trying to accomplish by doing an extra discovery or getting that additional stakeholder, and what's that purpose for that discovery? And second, be clear on your requests, right? So if you need additional resources from the customer side, which additional stakeholders you're actually going to need and why. Maybe it is a technical resource, maybe to understand the backend process, right? Or maybe more of a business driver that is whoever's the team's most affected by these problems, right? So once you have made those points across, a lot of organizations will be willing to introduce you and bring you into the right people, especially because you have their best interest in mind, right? And they understand that. So yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. And I think too, if you do the front half of discovery effective, you can really uncover depths about that organization, the inner workings of it. And if you do a good job there, it can more easily unlock doors because you have that baseline knowledge there. So when you ask for those introductions to other technical people or whatever, it can really be a much easier process because they're like, well, yeah, it seems like you know a lot about our organization. So I certainly agree with you there. Cool. Well, we're going to go to kind of one of our last questions here. I want to start off with Stephanie. So what are some tips for eliciting answers when a prospect are skeptical or reluctant to be open?
These are my favorite. I love the challenge of like a tough nut to crack, right? But I think it's important to understand that usually people do want to talk about themselves, particularly about things that drive them crazy at work, right? Like that's usually a conversation topic that folks are willing to talk about. So I think it's important to realize that when a prospect is feeling skeptical about engaging in discovery, if they're resisting the meeting, if they're kind of giving you one-word answers, or just really startlingly vague about every question, it's probably because they're feeling uncomfortable. with either why you're asking the question or what you're going to do with the information, or even how it might impact their job, right? So there are things that that are there that I think it's important to be empathetic to, and so give context to your questions, help them understand why you're asking, especially when it's a question that you know is going to be sticky, right? So instead of asking, hey, what factors are you going to prioritize to make this decision, customer, you might say something like, I know there are a lot of different factors that go into a decision like this, and every customer I work with prioritizes things a little differently, and that impacts how we deliver the solution. Can you help me understand what the 3 most important things are for you so that I prioritize the same things? Right? It's adding that layer of context, and not with every question, but with the ones that really require that extra why. And the other area where I see this coming up is just really pulling teeth to get customers to engage is when you're trying to quantify their answers. And it's important to quantify, right? We need to get those numbers out of the prospect. But I think too many discovery questions ask for metrics that the prospect may not be prepared with, or they might not even know or have the ability to know the answer to. So for example, one that I hear is, how much time do your administrators spend doing X every week? And there are a couple of problems with that. Like first, if I'm the prospect that you ask that question to, I am immediately suspicious that you're plugging my answer directly into an ROI calculator to convince me that your software is not too expensive, right? But second, if I don't know the answer, I'm gonna feel pretty dumb, right? Like I'm not very good at my job. And if my boss or my colleagues are also on this conversation, I'm probably going to feel embarrassed or defensive. So those are not feelings that you want to invoke. So when it comes to quantifying, I try to give options, ranges, scales, ways for folks to kind of answer the question in a quantitative way that doesn't require them to run a report or do a mathematical calculation in their head. So for example, I would say, with what I previously said of how much time do your administrators spend every week doing this, I would instead say, most administrative teams I talk with in your field spend anywhere between 8 to 10 hours per week on this kind of task. Would you say your administrative team is over or under that amount? So what I've done there is turned kind of a hairy question into a multiple choice question. And who doesn't like a multiple choice question? Because there's a really good shot you're going to get it right. And I've also shared information with them that's going to give me credibility, right? I've said most other customers in your field spend this amount of time. And I've given myself a good opening for a follow-up question. And once they answer that, why is that? Why would you assess yourself that way? That's going to give me a lot more detail than a purely quantified answer.
Love that. That was just fantastic. So many tips in there, and really the part that I'm going to take away as a personal takeaway for myself is the context behind a question, and like kind of justifying and how you change that 2 questions that you just asked there so beautifully. So I really appreciate that knowledge there. And we got about 13 minutes before the top of the hour here, so I'd like to shift gears just slightly and go into some Q&A before we kind of finish up with our last Zoom poll here. So I'm going to start with a question from Alfredo. So how can SC teams influence how other teams like BDRs ask proper qualification discovery calls that can really benefit the pre-sales organization? So does that question strike anyone that they want to kind of take lead on that one there? Oh, Mark. All right.
I have actually, I've done some training, but I've also actually just shared a high-level discovery script, technical script or business value script with my AEs and said, here's high level what I need. I get back a few questions. They do a great job making it conversational. These are talented people. And then I glance at it and say, okay, I need a discovery call because there's follow-up questions now I have in my head. I can't workflow everything, but I can get to the business value, the key areas we want to cover, and also the stakeholder value. Because if you really want to crush it and knock it over the fence, who's attending the meeting? What stakeholders? And are you going to have something, a nugget of value for each one of those stakeholders? Because any one of them might be able to shut you down.
Like that. That's great, Mark. Thank you for that answer there. Here's another question in the vein of silence is golden. So on discovery calls and making sure that we take time to pause, how do you handle the flip side of that? So if someone gets a little chatty and they don't want to stop talking. So who feels inspired to answer that type of question there? How do you rein them back in and kind of bring them back to the conversation?
I can take that. I feel like at the beginning of a discovery, just setting expectations, right? Hey, the reason for this discovery is for me to understand your process, all these things, and come up with or goals for demo, right? So just and even having a slide in front of them with those goals and those expectations. So if they go off, start talking about, their cat or whatever, you can just bring them back. Hey, this is what we're focusing on. Let's take control of your discovery. But that tends to happen.
Nice. I feel like there's a story in there about a cat somewhere, but we can deal with that at another time. But
yeah, way too much about someone's cat, I'm sure. But I want to say, like, don't discount just letting people talk about what they want to talk about. Obviously, like, it's a difference between it's their cat versus an actual work issue, but you get some gold there, right? And there's something to be said for understanding what people are really wanting to talk with you about, because that's going to give you a sense of where their pains are, versus if you're too controlling of the conversation, they're going to answer your questions, but you might not learn about the questions that you didn't think to ask, right? There might be important stuff there.
Yeah, perfect. And I think we'll keep on moving through some of these Q&A questions, because this next one I'm curious to get everyone's perspective here. So what's the panel's take on continuing discovery over email as opposed to doing like another discovery meeting?
Yeah, I think this is a good compromise when the sales team's trying to move with some urgency, or perhaps the customer's got a really tight calendar. I think, if you get some answers via email, it can help direct you where perhaps you don't have to do as meaty of an upfront discovery. And instead you just have to fill in the gaps, maybe ask some of those value questions, get a better understanding of the problems we're trying to solve with the things that they're looking for. I think at the end of the day, it's all about learning more about the customer. And so I loved Stephanie's point earlier about doing that pre-call research as much as you can on public social, public websites, review sites, anything you can learn about them and their business, paired with what you can learn via email, should set you up so that, you have to ask fewer questions at the front of that call and get to what they're excited for, which is the demo.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. You can sometimes glean so much insight on the front half, so you just get started right on the right foot and you can really get to the meat of what you want to be speaking to. So I like that suggestion. That's great. Cool. I think we got time for maybe one more question here. What tools are being used by the SE community to document the outcomes of discovery? Anyone using any great tools right now?
Sounds like a niche market. Someone should take advantage of that.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have a standardized form, but it's nothing fancy. I don't know that you need anything too fancy. And we're storing that in our CRM, which tends to work pretty well as long as people know where to look for it on the sales side and the post-sale side. I think that's really important. And then the other thing that I think is important in any kind of, if you use any kind of form is you've got to have room to capture the details, because that's what I see getting missed most often. When SCs have a great discovery call and you see their notes and it's like, it's just a list of facts and you've lost the color, you've lost the detail, you've lost the stories, the examples. If you hear in a discovery call that, hey, Nancy has not taken a vacation in 6 years because this process just can't run without her, right? Like getting Nancy a vacation should be front and center of your demo, right? And so it's making sure, however you collect that data, that you're not missing those details, those colorful parts of the conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would be absolutely remiss if I did not mention that it is a startup idea, and that's actually what we do pretty well, honestly. So we help with discovery call process and putting all that information back in. So the startup exists. It's called Demo Flow. So it's a new piece that we just launched. So there is a way to do it. So there you go. Cool. Well, I think what we're going to move into next is we're going to do one last poll here. I'm not sure if we have time to finish up all the questions that have been asked. We're going to do one last poll here, and we're going to kind of wrap up here before end. So curious to hear kind of how we did here. I'm going to go ahead as we're kind of waiting for those polls to come in and those answers. And I think really kind of, from my perspective, I just want to thank everyone. I really appreciate for the time here today. Again, I'm Larson from DemoFlow. As those perfect tee up for an exit for me is like, that's what we help with. We can help you with discos and demos. And when you're trying to work with AEs and SCs in one call, do great discovery call process. Stephanie, I want to talk with you more about the prescriptive demos on a separate conversation, or discovery call process and questioning there. But thank you all for joining so much here today. It was an honor to be a part of this and being so active here. If you're interested in understanding more about what we do, my door is always open. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, shoot me an email, whatever is easiest. So thank you all to the guests. Thank you to the panelists. I really appreciate sharing those insights there. And then of course, if you all haven't checked out PreSales Collective, I'm sure you have, but check out their Slack channel. They have an incredible, really, really active Slack channel. There are tons of great tips going out, content that's being shared. The entire team at PreSales Collective is doing a fantastic job with a lot of the content that they're curating, and they're being very, very prescriptive about what they're allowing people to put in there and making sure it's really valuable, hence the poll here at the end. So thank you again, everyone, for the time here today. And I guess we can kind of wrap up. So I really appreciate everyone's time, and yeah, we can kind of call it here. Thank you, man.
Disco never dies.
Disco never dies.
Right on. Can't wait to see the t-shirt.
Thank you.
It's going to be great.
Have a great day.
Thanks,
Cool.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.